shopkeeper's shop and was shown to a sofa. And there she was given mint tea, and the shopkeeper, a professional man, asked her how he could help. I need some silk, she said, some fine silk for my son's girlfriend wants to make a dress. And he starts getting different bolts of silk out and showing her, holding them over his arm. And she chooses a beautiful, fine, delicate silk, a yellow silk. How is this, he says, as he begins to measure it off, hand to nose, and hands it to his assistant to cut the piece off. It will be fine, she says. It will be fine. Let me look. And he's surprised. She seemed to have chosen what she wants, but she doesn't seem to be happy. But he bows low and he hands the silk to her. And she says, I'm ashamed. And she looks over her shoulder to make sure no one else can hear. I'm ashamed, she said, for my son is seeing a married woman. A married woman. The shame. And here I am buying material for her to make a dress. For I can deny my son nothing. And as she spoke, her hand was shaking. And some mint tea spilt on the very corner of the material that had been prepared for her. The shopkeeper came forward. I'll change it, madam. She said, that's fine. It's going to be made into a dress. It's one little spot on the corner. It will be left behind in the making. And he wrapped it up in tissue paper and she paid for it. She left the shop and went across the square, down an alleyway, until she came to a row of houses. And she walked down the row of houses until she came to a blue door. And it was a hot day and she was tired. She knocked on the door and a young woman came to the door and she said, oh, my dear, I'm so glad you're in. It's such a hot day. Could I trouble you for a glass of water? Certainly, auntie, she said. For auntie was a term of respect. And she brought her in and sat her on the sofa, went off to fetch a glass of water. And as she did so, the woman put this parcel, the tissue paper and material, underneath a cushion. And then they sat and drank their water and chatted and spoke about the town. And after a while, the woman said she felt better and thanked the young woman for her consideration and the water, and she left. Now the day carried on, the afternoon carried on, and eventually the shopkeeper closed up his shop and he set off across the square, down the alleyway, and walked down the row of houses until he came to the blue door. He had a smile on his face. He liked coming home. As the door opened, he could smell the meal that was being cooked in the kitchen. Homecomings. He loved homecomings. And his wife came out of the kitchen. Oh, husband, you must have worked hard all day. Sit down on the sofa. I'll bring you a drink. And he heard her clanking away in the kitchen as she prepared some tea for him. And he sat on the sofa. And as he sat, his hand touched something by the cushion. And he looked down and withdrew the tissue paper parcel. The parcel that he had wrapped earlier in the day. And when he looked at the yellow silk, there on the corner was the stain made by the mint tea. And it gradually dawned on him. His wife, his wonderful wife, was this woman's son's lover. How could that be? His face began to turn red. His teeth were clenched. A rage took over him as he stood and marched in the kitchen and began berating his wife for the unfaithful hussy that she must be. The wife reeled, not knowing what she was being accused of, but he ranted on and on. He knocked the dish off the hob and it smashed on the floor, and he marched upstairs and climbed into their bed. Confused and crying and unhappy, the wife cleared up the mess, sat for the evening, and then went to bed, and he was fast asleep but tense. And she climbed in beside him and went to sleep. When she woke in the morning, he was not next to her in the bed, but she could hear him clumping about downstairs, still in a temper. She heard the door slam and winced as he left the house. He walked down the street and through the alleyway and into the square. And Iblis was sitting on the bench and the woman was standing next to him. And they watched, his eyes red-faced with tears, his teeth gritted. They watched him open his shop and snap at his assistant. He crashed and banged about and almost threw the material onto the racks. And Iblis nodded in approval. You have done well. You have done that which I could not do, he nodded. And the woman stood, arms folded, watching the scene opposite. And then she said, you know, in an instant, I can turn that back. Ha, said Iblis. Now you brag. Now you brag. You have devastated that man's life. His wife will never know what she is accused of. Then a wager, said the woman. 10 pieces of silver say that I can change this back. Iblis took a leather pouch from his belt and counted out 10 pieces of silver. And the woman looked at him haughtily as she walked back across the square. When she walked into the shop, the man was too civil to say something rude to her, but he did not show her the smiles and bows of the day before, but asked her why she had come back to his shop. Oh, you would not believe it, she said. What a stupid old woman I am. I am so embarrassed. I left you yesterday with my parcel. I went off through the alleyway, down the street, and it was so hot I was feeling faint, and I knocked on a door. It was a blue door, I think. I knocked on a blue door, and a young woman took me in and gave me a glass of water, and we had a lovely chat. It was so nice. But what did I do? Foolish woman that I am. I left my parcel behind. Shopkeeper was shocked. Will you fetch it now? No, I'm too embarrassed. I'm too embarrassed to go back and fetch the parcel. I would like to buy some more silk for my son's girlfriend, if that is okay. It dawned on the shopkeeper what he had done. He called his assistant and asked him to serve this lady no charge. He left the shop immediately, almost running across the square, down the alleyway, along the houses, and he burst through the blue door. And there was his wife in the kitchen, preparing her own breakfast, and was startled to see him back so early and frightened after yesterday's scene. But he flung himself onto his knees and he grabbed her legs and he said, how can you forgive me? How could I have been so stupid? And she took him by the shoulders And she pulled him up and said, "You foolish man." And they embraced and they were happy again. Meanwhile, the woman left the fabric shop and crossed the square. But Iblis was nowhere to be seen. But there on the bench was a leather purse containing 10 silver pieces, for Iblis always pays his debts. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. And have I got the pleasure of your company tomorrow night?
Absolutely.
Great. Lovely story. Well told. I like that. That's my kind of story, that is. Right, so I'm going to go to Karen, and then from Karen to Rona, from Rona to Baba. Is he still there, Baba? I've had a message saying he's going to pop one in, which is absolutely brilliant. I haven't seen you for a bit, Baba, so okay. So Karen Pfeiffer, who's got a very famous younger sister, she tells me.
Older sister, excuse me, please. Yes.
Older sister. I do beg your pardon. I'm sorry. Yes.
Yes, hello everybody. Lovely to be here. Thank you for letting me tell. This is a story I'm working on at the moment. It takes us back from Africa to not quite the UK. We're sort of on the way. Last year was lucky enough to be invited to play quite a string of concerts on Guernsey. And that was my first time on Guernsey, and I was quite fascinated by the island. Of course, Guernsey has got a big German connection as well, which is a lot of history, but I've heard so many beautiful stories of people telling me how well they went on with the Germans over there. So I was very interested in history and read quite a few of tale books as well. And this is a story I picked up there that I really enjoyed reading. And it's set in Guernsey, obviously, and it tells the story of Henry, who worked in a workshop originally, but he decided at some point, I think I'm going to change my career. So he carried on working in his workshop, in his father's workshop, building a boat because he wanted to be a fisherman. He lived in a beautiful granite house down by the sea with his new wife, Peggy. And she didn't know about his plans yet because he wanted to surprise her. But one day he came and said, "Peggy, I've got a surprise for you." And he took her and blindfolded her and took her to the workshop of his father, where he had built his new fishing boat. And he took the blindfold off her, and she was standing in front of him, and he said, "What a beautiful boat. What's that all about?" And he says, "I would like to change my career. I want to be a fisherman. I've been talking to all the fishermen here on the island, and they gave me lots of beautiful tips where I can get the best fish. And this is what I would like to do. I will catch fish and we'll sell them on the market. And that will be my future plan for us." And Peggy liked the idea. And she was even more pleased when she saw the letters on the boat that spelled Peggy. She was delighted. So the next morning, they were dragging the boat to the seashore, but he overslept a little bit, so it was a little bit too late for the fish. So he thought, "Oh well, I'll start my new career tomorrow." The next day, he got up in the break of dawn. And he was delighted when he saw that Peggy had put out his Guernsey jumper. I'm sure you all have seen Guernsey jumpers. They're really nice, woolly, knitted Guernsey wool jumpers. And he needed that because it was quite a stormy day, but still well enough to go out. And he went back to the shore. He dragged his boat into the water, and suddenly he heard a familiar voice. There's Peggy standing up there with hands full of flour because she was baking, and she said jokingly, "Henry, where are you going?" And Henry shouted back, "Peggy, I'm going fishing." And she said, "Good luck." And so off he went. This day, Henry didn't catch any fish. He went on the sea, he put out his hook, but nothing. He was a little bit disappointed, so he came back. He thought, "Oh well, maybe the beginner's luck will come tomorrow. So he went on the next day, and it happened, the same thing happened. He went down to the sea. Peggy was standing there with her hands in flour and saying, "Henry, where are you going?" And he called back, "Peggy, I'm going fishing." What they didn't know was that the fish heard them. And of course they were warned, so they were avoiding the hook of Henry when he was going out fishing. So they all swam away, and he never caught a fish on that day either. This continued for a week and for another week. And Henry was quite disheartened because he didn't catch a single fish. But Peggy encouraged him to said, "Henry, really, I think really it's just you have to keep going. Just try and keep going. It will be fine." And he poured him a little Guernsey cider, and he was happy and well encouraged for the next day. This tradition of shouting went on, and of course they didn't know that it deterred the fish from going on the hook. So another week went into the land, and another week went into the land, and another week, and Henry did not catch a single fish. And he was very disheartened, and he was about to give it all up. But Peggy said, "Look, why don't you just try another week, and maybe we'll be lucky. Have another chat with the fishermen, maybe they can tell you a few more tips and tricks." Now, Peggy was a fantastic baker. I already said she stood there every morning with flour in her hands. She was baking the famous Guernsey gash. Has anybody been to Guernsey? Have you ever tried Guernsey gash? No, yeah, you have, Alistair. Did you like Guernsey gash? It's gorgeous, isn't it? For everybody who hasn't been there, hasn't tried it, it's a kind of a fruit loaf that they usually eat with some butter or with jam or something like that. And it's gorgeous. And she was the best Guernsey gash baker, Peggy was. So they decided, because it started that the money was getting a little bit tight, that Peggy would sell her gash at the market to keep them afloat, literally. And so it came that Peggy went out this morning to go to the market and didn't shout to Henry, "Where are you going, Henry?" So in quiet, in silence, Henry went and pulled his boat in on off the shore, went on the sea. It was a nice and sunny day, and he had a few new tips also from the fishermen where he could get the best fish. And he went down and threw out his hook and his fishing line, and he sat there, and hardly 5 minutes later, he felt the hook on his fishing line, and he pulled out the biggest fish he'd seen in a long, long time. And he was chuffed, of course, to bits. And so it went on. He pulled out his hook again, and he pulled another fish out, and it went the whole morning that he was just kept on fishing. And he had all sizes and kinds of fish that he fished this morning. So just after lunchtime, he went back because his boat was full, and he went to the market and he sold all the fish, and that was a happy day in Peggy's and Henry's house. So he was thinking, what was different today? And he realized that, of course, Peggy hadn't shouted to him that morning, and they tried the same the next morning. And again, he was very, very successful fishing and fishing and fishing and fishing. And he was the most successful fisherman in the next few months and years on the whole of Guernsey. He was selling the best fish on Guernsey on the market, all sizes, all shapes, all forms. But he never told anybody his secret. Just shortly before he died, he told the other fishermen what had happened. And so in Guernsey, no fisherman will ever say, "I'm going fishing." They will say, "I'm going out on the boat, I'm going out on the sea." And that's why Guernsey fishermen are very, very successful.
Right, so we've got some technical questions to ask you about jumpers and sweaters and Guernseys.
Go on.
Okay, because Baba's asking he uses the word sweaters and we use jumpers or cardigans, and cardigans are ones with the buttons and sweaters are the pullover ones. Then you have slipovers, which means they've got no sleeves. But the other thing is in the UK, Baba, that each seaport where the fishermen will go, they have a different way of knitting the jumpers, sweaters together. So the patterns are all different. So if you find a body with such and such a pattern on, you take it back to that port and someone will know who that person is. So the Guernsey of Jersey is different from the ones for Guernsey and Alderney, and there'll be a different one for the Cork and for Shannon in Southern Ireland, and down the east coast of England there's Whitby and there's Scarborough and there's Cleethorpes and all those ports, and each one has a different the way that it's knitted. It's not pattern is the word I'm looking for, and each one will be separate and very, very recognizable. Now, the ones I know best are Whitby because of Whitby Folk Week, and I can spot them straight away and everything else. But the Guernseys they're talking about, they will stop the wind coming through. They're very tightly knit, but they use an oiled wool as well. So they're not 100% waterproof, but they keep a lot of the weather out at the same time. And they've got a big crew neck that comes up behind your neck to keep the top of your head warm and stuff like that. So it's also there's a whole sort of history to them, which is why I said sorter. Okay, there's a whole history to them, and I was going to have one knitted up. I've just had a cardigan done, and the wool was £100. That's £100 in UK money. And then you've got to get some lady who was because they're hand knitted. You can't. They've got to be hand knitted. And so you've got some lady, and there's many hours work in knitting one of them up. There really is. But Jan, who's done it for me, she says, I'm happy to do them for you, Mike, because I can sit in front of the television and it's a chance to really knit with good wool to make a fine thing. And she enjoys doing it. So there's that side to it as well. So a bit of a longer answer than you thought. So Karen, that was lovely, and thank you very much. That's great. I've been to the Channel Islands many times. I love the Channel Islands. Thank you very much. That's great. Well done. Nice story. So we're going to go to Rona next. And before we just go to Rona while she gets herself ready, I was going back to the collaboration bid. The bid is called Healing Under the Stars. And it's to do with, we in Shropshire here have the dark space areas. So when the nighttime sky comes down, we haven't got many lights because we're such a rural area. So people come many miles to sit and gaze up at the night skies here. And the ones in the desert, for millennia, they'd be sat round on the camel trains and the drover routes that we call them and everything. They're sat round and they look up at the constellations and they tell the stories of those sky. And they've got their own stories. There's many to do with the Greek myths, which is why Despina's. I was saying just before you turned up, Despina, it's a bid. It doesn't mean we've got the money. Don't go and spend any money till I tell you to. Okay. But Despina is quite a well-recognized constellation person, if that's the right way to describe it. So we're looking forward to doing all that. Anyway, we'll go to Rona. Where are you, Rona, geographically?
I'm at the moment I'm in England, but I'll be going back to Italy in a week or so.
Right, okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just like to keep a track on you, you know.
Keeping tabs on me, you mean?
Yeah. Are you going to East Anglia?
Actually, fingers crossed, that's why I'm still here. I might be, so
I'll see you there. Right, okay.
see how things pan out. But I just want to share something with you with all that talk about jumpers and sweaters. My mum, who was blind from birth, could knit an Aran sweater without a pattern, and she could knit it in whatever size you wanted, whether it was that size or a great big thing to fit my older brothers. And she would just sit there knitting away. And I could never get my head around the fact that she could do it at all, let alone without a pattern. So,
Yeah,
but Mama, we loved those sweaters.
Yeah.
Anyway,
and just while we're talking about knitting, I'll chuck this one in, because in 1944 in France, one of the ways they would count what the Germans, keep an eye on what the Germans were doing. So if the Germans came past with a convoy of tanks, for instance, there'd be an old lady knitting. And what she was knitting was the number of tanks that went past. And so she'd knit so many rows, and each row would mean a tank. And when they'd finished, they'd pick up the piece of knitting and hand it to the resistance. And the resistance would know that 20 tanks had just gone through that village. And who the hell would stop an old lady knitting? Not even a German soldier. Okay.
Wow. That's a great tale. Thanks
Yeah.
for sharing that, Mike. Well, this man, every Friday night, he had exactly the same routine. After tea, he would kiss his wife on the forehead, kiss both of his beautiful children on the forehead, and off he would go. And where was he going, you might ask? Well, he was going to seek his fortune. His father had told him when he was a young man, go seek your fortune. So every Friday night, he had done this for the last 15 years. He never, ever even had a clue from anybody. And people that he had asked before and had asked several times were getting a bit, fed up with it, thinking he was a wee bit loopy. He stopped this old woman one day who was in her garden, and he had seen her several times and had spoken to her before. And when he went to speak to her again, she said, don't even think about asking me where you're going to find your fortune. I've just lost my husband. And if we had known where to find your fortune, we would have known where to find our own. So be off with you. Well, he'd never been spoken to like that before, and he really felt quite bad. And he really felt quite guilty that he had disturbed this old woman yet again. So that changed his tack a little. He was less likely to speak to the people that he had spoken to only recently, and he was just searching out the people that he hadn't seen for a while. Hi there, it's me. I know you're going to say, are you still looking for your fortune? Well, yes, I am, because I know it's out there somewhere. It just nobody seems to believe me. But just beyond his village and the one after that and the one after that, a new person had arrived that nobody had ever seen before. And she sat in a tent at the end of the marketplace. So one or two people had said to him, well, no, we don't know any more than what we did the last time you asked us about where you might find your fortune. But there's somebody new here, and she might know. She's in the tent at the end of the market. So off he went, striding along. And there she was, sitting in the marketplace, the storyteller. And she greeted him. Hello, she said. I know what you've come for. Well, no, I don't think you can. I've never spoken to you before. You don't know who I am. She said, I know exactly who you are. You're the man who's looking for his fortune. And I can tell you, it's back in your village. Oh, no, definitely not, he said. I've taken that place apart, leaf by leaf, stone by stone. It's not in my village. She said, I can assure you it is. Well, how would you know? He said. Well, she says, as storytellers, we really know everything. There's nothing that's never been discussed with us at some point or other. And over the years, over the decades, over the generations, stories get passed on. And you, young man, are the young man who's looking for his fortune. And I am here to tell you where it is. Well, he was a bit fed up because he didn't believe her. Which was weird, really, considering he's been asking all this time for somebody to tell him. Somebody tells him where it is, and he's having none of it. Of course, he's having none of it because she said it's back in your village. And he knows it's not because he's taking the place apart. But he was fed up by this time. And instead of carrying on and being away for another night, because that's what he used to do, he would leave on the Friday night and not come back until the Sunday evening, leaving his wife and children at home, week after week, month after month, year after year. She never complained. Well, that was it. He'd had enough. He was just going to go home early. And he did. And he walked home all the while thinking, could that storyteller be right? No, I know she's not right. She can't be right. I've searched everywhere. Everywhere. I've even turned up old gravestones, everything. No, she can't be right. It's not there. And eventually he reached home. And when he got home, before he could even open the latch, they didn't have locks and keys back in those days. They didn't need them. Just a wooden handle that you turned. And when he turned that wooden handle, his little girl, 5 years old, was stood there in front of him, and she screamed with delight, "Daddy, Daddy, you're home!" And she threw her arms round his legs and was hugging him. And then his little boy appeared behind her. "Daddy, Daddy, you're back early. Does that mean you've found your fortune?" And then his wife appeared at the kitchen door. "Oh, hello, sweetheart. You're home early. Oh, that's wonderful. I'll get tea ready now." "Daddy, Daddy, he didn't answer me. Have you found your fortune?" And he looked around that little house, saw his beautiful wife, his gorgeous children, and saw that he didn't need anything more than he had right here. And he thought, the storyteller was right. It was back in my village, not only back in my village, but behind my own front door. I have found my fortune.
Right. So we've got Baba next, and then Keith from Lincolnshire, and then Chuffy. Are you listening, or you're just listening? Is that okay? Yeah, no, that's fine. Absolutely. You're very, very welcome to do just that. That's not a problem at all. So we go from Keith from Lincolnshire to Despina, and then Despina to Janet. Okay, so Baba.
All right. So bear with me. I'm in a new environment, new setting, and I have a computer that can't make up its mind whether it wants to work or not. So
well, I know about the computer because I do that a lot.
I got my fingers crossed because I'm supposed to have a new computer this week. Hopefully it'll come through next week, but fingers crossed, toes crossed, everything crossed but my eyes. So I had the perfect story picked out, and of course I forgot it. That's all right. I have a backup story, and I want to share that. The backup story is in the rough, but I want to share it with you. And it's about one of my. Let me try that in English, or as my British friends say, let me try that in American. John Rowe and them constantly reminded me in Marrakesh that I didn't speak English, I spoke American. That's what that was about. Okay, anyhow.
You're not Welsh anyway.
Oh. Well, one of my favorite characters is Anansi. And in some parts of West Africa, Anansi is a spider god. In some parts, he's a man that assumes the shape of a spider, or a spider that assumes the shape of a man. And in some places, he's a deity, and in some places, he's a semi-deity. Anyhow, this is a story about Anansi and how Anansi saves the antelope. And this story takes place, if you took all the ages of everyone in this room right now, multiplied it by 10, the story is older than that. The story begins with a bolt of lightning. Yes, a bolt. A bolt of lightning struck a tree, and struck many trees, in fact, and fire began to spread throughout the forest. Fire began to spread throughout the savannah. There was fire, 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 fire everywhere. The animals were in panic. I mean, I'd be in a panic too if all of a sudden I was surrounded by fire. And they began to run here and there and there and here, and they were just running amok. I've never understood what amok was, but that's another story. But anyhow, the animals were running, and some of them were running into the fire, some of them were running away from the fire, but they were trying to find their way away from the fire. But there was an antelope who didn't quite know what to do because she couldn't see over the flames. And she heard a voice saying, "If you let me sit in your ear, I will guide you to safety." Now, I don't know about you, but if I suddenly heard voices and I'm supposed to be by myself, I'd be a little concerned. But the antelope kind of looked left and right. But before she could say anything, Anansi lowered himself and sat in her ear and said, "I can see above the flames sitting in your ear. Just follow my directions and we should be safe. Now run forward." And the antelope ran forward. "Now turn left." And the antelope turned left. "Now turn right." And the antelope turned right. "Now run forward." And the antelope ran forward. Left, right, forward, right, left, forward, forward, left, right. And they kept doing that until they came to a river, and they crossed the river and to the other side where there was no fire. Anansi lowered himself from the antelope's ear and began to walk alongside of it. Now, this has always puzzled me because antelopes are very fast animals. They have very long legs. Anansi, even though he has 8 legs, he's kind of short. But he walked alongside of her, and they talked, and they became friendlier. And in fact, they became friends. Well, the months went on, and the antelope gave birth to a baby antelope. Well, she couldn't hardly give birth to a grown antelope, but that's another story. And antelopes, when they're born, like most newborn babes, are kind of helpless. And the mother would have to go get food, bring it back, and feed the babe directly. Well, she left the babe unwatched, unprotected while she was gone. But she would hide the babe in the deep bush. One day, she picked up the scent of hunters, and she could hear them. And they were in the mood for antelope meat. And she knew that they were going to come and find her and her babes. So she dashed out of her hidden space before they could see where she was. And she began to run. And they said, we're going to get that. We're going to eat well tonight. And they began to run after her. And she ran just fast enough for them to keep her in their sight, but not slow enough for them to catch her. And she ran and she ran and they ran and they ran. Until they were exhausted and said, this is too much work. This is too much work. Wait. Maybe she had a cub. Maybe she had a babe. Let's go back and look. And so they went back to the tall, deep bush. And they looked and looked and looked and looked. But they could not find the babe. After a while, the mother antelope returned to where she left her babe. But she couldn't find it either. She looked, she looked, she looked, she looked. And she couldn't find her babe. Now she's beginning to panic. Because on Mother's Day of all days, not to be able to find your babe was very distressing. And then she heard this voice. Don't worry. I will show you your babe. Your baby is safe. And what had happened was, when the antelope dashed away, Anansi happened to be in the area. And while he watched the hunters chase the antelope, he spun a web and spun a deep and intricate web that hid the baby antelope from the eyes of the hunters. And the hunters could not find it because all they saw was a web. A thick web, but a web nonetheless. Anansi undid the web, reuniting mother and babe. And on this Mother's Day, I'm glad I told this tale. But you see, this tale involved a tale, actually 2 tales, 3 if you consider the fact that I'm telling a tale about tales. But that's an Anansi tale. And I hope that you enjoyed this story well. Happy Mother's Day. Asante.
Oh, thank you very much, Baba. That's brilliant again and again and again. Right, so we're moving over to the flatlands of Lincolnshire, so I'm going over to East Anglia for next weekend, which I know is nowhere near Lincolnshire. It's hundreds of miles away, but at least it's the other side of the country. So,
yeah, I'll be there. I'll be there next week. So.
Looking forward to it. Yeah, we're all going to meet up for John Rowe's little thing. We'll all meet up. Is Maria, you're waving? Are you coming out? I know Despina's going to be there.
I certainly am. I can't wait. I'm really looking forward to it.
Are you a booked artist?
No, not this time. I came as a booked artist the last time, but a lot of Mad for Road tellers meet at East Anglia, and we just have a busman's holiday. We just have a great time. So
yeah, well, that's pretty much what I'm doing as well. So I'm looking forward to being in your company. Great, Keith. Keith from Lincolnshire.
Okay, right. Hello, everybody. And it's great to see you, Babasi, again. It's a long time since I've seen you, and thank you for your story. That's good. Right. I told this story actually last night at the Ballyim Barn. So Rona said this before. So it's one that I haven't told very much, so I'm sort of working on it and trying to develop it a little bit. Well, it was in Winchester in the 13th century. And King Athelwold was dying. He was very poorly. And there was no queen to look after his daughter, Goldborough. What could he do? And he called together the earls and barons under his command. And he commissioned one of the earls, Earl Godric, to look after his daughter Goldborough, because she was so young she could neither walk nor talk. And so she needed a lot of looking after, and it had to be a long time before she'd become queen. And so Godric, he promised that he'll look after the girl. And the king also said, when she's old enough, when she's got to maybe 20, find a young man who is very tall and very strong, and that they will be married, and they can then rule the kingdom. And the earl said he would promise to do that. And the king, he just rested. He took his last rites and died peacefully in his sleep, knowing that his daughter, Goldborough, will be looked after. Well, Earl Godric, he gathered together a lot of the other earls and barons, and he made them swear to him, allegiance to him, as he would rule the land. And as Goldborough grew, she grew to a fine young lady, very beautiful, very intelligent. And the Earl thought to himself, shall I be ruled by this young girl? No, why? Well, my son would be better to take over ruling now. And so he went back on his word, and he took Goldborough and he imprisoned her in a castle in Devon. And there she was, just given the basics to eat and to wear, and she was denied any friends to visit her. Now, at the same time, over in Denmark, there was a king, Birkenbein. And he was a very strong and very forthright knight and a good king. And the people of Denmark, they loved him. And his wife, also the queen, had died. But he had 3 children, 2 daughters and a son. And his son was called Havelok. But then suddenly the king, Birkenbein, he became very ill. And he was about to die, and all the people were astonished that he was so strong and fit one day, and then he's so poorly. And he called together a few friends, and among his friends, his friend was called Godard. And he asked Godard, he commanded Godard to look after his 3 children, and particularly look after the Havelok, and train him to be a knight, and so that he eventually can be strong enough and old enough and wise enough to rule the kingdom. And Godard, he promised he would. And then very suddenly, King Birkenbein, he died, leaving Godard in charge. Now, he also wasn't very honest, and he had the 3 children imprisoned in a castle. And then one day he was becoming very angry, and he went to the castle, he drew his sword, and he cut the throats of the 2 girls. And he was about to kill Havelok. But Havelok fell on his knees and said, please spare me. I will deny that I am the king's heir. I will go off to sea and you'd never see me again. And Goddard, he thought, okay, well, he relented from killing Havelock. But the next day he sent for a young and older fisherman. He was a fisherman that was in bondage. It was a kind of a serf, but he was a fisherman. And he sent for Grim and said, now take this young lad out when you go fishing tomorrow night and drown him in the sea. And I'll reward you. And you'll then be rewarded and not be a serf anymore. And so Grim, he took the young lad in the sack and took him home. Under the sack, and they fed young Havelock that night. And the next night he was about to go out fishing, and he saw on the shoulder of Havelock a gold and red mark. And he realised that this was King Berkhan Bean's son, Havelock, who was heir to the throne. And he said to Havelock, we will look after you and remember us when you come into your kingdom. And soon after that, Grim went back to Goddard and said, I have drowned that young lad in the sea and he's no more. I would like my reward. But Goddard refused. He said, oh, you will continue to be a serf. You will not get a reward. In fact, you maybe ought to be hung on the gallows. But Grim was able to go back, and he went back to his home, and he was in fear of what Goddard might do. And so he fitted out his fishing boat. He took his wife and his 3 sons, 2 daughters, and Havelock, and set out across the North Sea. And the wind blew and blew and blew and blew until he landed at the entrance to a river. And that river was the River Humber. And he set up shop, as it were, because he was a fisherman. He got the fishing boat, and he and his sons, they went out fishing, and they came back to Lindsay and would sell all their fish. And after about 12 years, Havelock had grown enough and strong enough. He was tall and strong, and he joined the team and went fishing and then sold the fish to people that lived round and about. But then there was famine, there was lack of fish, and things were very difficult for Grim and his family, and said to Havelock, you go off to Lincoln and you seek your fortune. And Grim took some sailcloth and he put it over the shoulders of Havelock, but he had no trousers, no hose, and nothing on his feet. And Havelock, he walked over to Lincoln, it's about maybe 40 odd miles, and he went to the market looking for work. And the cry went out that there was needing the meat from the market be taken to the castle, to the kitchen in the castle. And so Havelock was able to do that. He got some meat there, and he took it over to the kitchen in the castle. And he was rewarded with a farthing bun. And the next day he went out again, and he was able to carry meat for the cook that worked in the castle kitchen. And the cook took a shy to him and said, you come work in the castle. You come work in the kitchen. And he provided Havelock with some proper clothes, and he worked very hard. He was very handsome, very tall, very strong, and everybody loved him. Now, Earl Goodric from Cornwall, who was ruling the land, was going around to lots and lots of the villages and lots of the cities in particular, and was meeting all the rulers and the treasurers and the and the councillors there to do business and to rule the land. And at that time, they decided they would have a fair. And there was a large stone. And the challenge was this, that the young stone and throw it as far as they could. But the young men and the knights that came with Goddard could hardly lift this stone, let alone throw it. And the cook said to Havelock, you go and you throw the stone, because you're tall and strong. And Havelock, he went and he picked up the stone, he threw it 12 feet. And all the people were so pleased with him, and he was so, the fame went around that this young, handsome man was so strong and so handsome that they all loved him. And this came to the attention of Godric. And he remembered that he'd promised the king, Athelwold, that he would marry Goldborough to a strong, tall young man. I thought, well, if I get her to marry him, then I'll have control, because he's only a serf. He's only an ordinary man. And he sent for Goldborough and said to Goldborough, you will marry this man, Havelock. I will not do that. I'll not do that. No, I shall be marrying a prince, not just an ordinary serf. No. Godric said that if you do not, then I will blind you. I'll put your eyes out. And then he sent for Havelock and said, you are to marry Goldborough and have her as your wife. But Havelock said, well, I've no need for a wife and I can't look after her. Well, what am I going to do? You can't do that. But Godric said, you will marry her. Otherwise you'll be hung, drawn and quartered. And so Havelock and Goldborough were together, and they decided, because the Earl Godric was somewhat untrustworthy, not really to be trusted, they ran back, and they went all the way back to Grimsby. And when they got back to Grimsby, they found that Grim had died, sadly, but they were welcomed by the three brothers and the two sisters of the family of Grim. Now that night, when Havelock and Goldborough were asleep, they were dreaming. And at one point, Goldborough just opened her eyes just briefly and looked down and saw that Havelock had a red and gold mark on his shoulder. Then in the dream she had, an angel appeared and said, this is the King of Denmark. He is the prince. And so go with him and make him be a good wife. And at the same time, Havelock had a dream that he was to return to Denmark and rule there and sort it out, particularly with the Earl there that was causing havoc, causing so much disruption within Denmark. Goddard, the person that had tried to have Havelock killed. And so they fitted out a fishing boat, ready to sail across the North Sea back to Denmark. And the three sons of Grim, they went along as well. They came back to Denmark and they presented themselves as merchants. And they worked there for quite a while. And then there was Earl Uby. Saw these young men and thought they would be good for the army and train them as knights. And in the training one day, the shoulder of Havelock was exposed, and Earl Uby saw this red and gold mark and realised that this was Havelock, heir to the throne, the son of Birkenbein. And very soon, they formed an army of thousands of men. And Goddard, aware of all that was happening, he got his army, and they had an awful battle where hundreds of men died. But eventually, Goddard was captured and he was burned at the stake. But then Havelock and Goldborough, he was now the King of Denmark, left Earl Uby in charge and went back to Grimsby. And he had a monastery built for the Black Monks in thanks to God for looking after him. And that also, because Goldborough was now queen and he was the King of Denmark, they formed an army. And Goddard, with his army, they fought and fought and fought and fought. Big battle occurred in the east of Lindsey. And eventually, Goddard's army was defeated and he was captured and he was hung, drawn and quartered. And so Havelock and Goldborough, they lived and reigned the country for 60 years. And they had 15 sons and daughters that continued the rule. Now that is the story of Havelock the Dane. And if you go to the library in Grimsby, in Great Grimsby, there you'll see a big tapestry on the wall. And the central figure represents Grim with a sword in his hand. On his left shoulder, just behind his left shoulder, there is a little girl, or a woman, with a crown on her head, Goldborough. And on behind the other shoulder is a fine young tall man with a crown on his head, Havelock the Dane. And so that's the story of Havelock the Dane and of how Grimsby got its name.
Well, I always knew that Grimsby had a grim story to be told about it. So it's the first time I've heard that. I don't know many of the stories. I know lots of the stories about that kind of stuff in Gloucester and Wolverhampton and places like that, but I hadn't heard that one before. So thanks, Keith. That's very,
Okay.
very nice of you. It's lovely to hear a local story told by a local bloke. It really is. So we're going to have another local person telling a local story. So we're going to Greece to talk to Despina. And so after Despina, we're going to have Janet, and then Janet, we're going to Maria. Are you telling a story tonight, Maria? Brilliant. So last but very much not least is what we'll say. Okay. So we'll go to Despina first.
Okay, well, you know how it is that usually we come here unawares of what story we're going to tell, and then we hear other tellers tell, and then we get inspired and remember a story, and that's how it goes. However, the two people that inspired my story today are gone now. So it does have a sultan in it, like Alistair's tale, and it does have a fisherman in it, like Karen's tale. So somewhere there, very close to where Keith's story took place, in the northern part of Africa, there was a fisherman. And that fisherman that day caught a huge fish. Now, I don't know if you must like fish. I mean, your national dish is fish and chips, isn't it? I come from an island, we love fish here, but okay. That fisherman knew that their sultan had a particular taste for fish. He was nuts for fish. He loved fish of any kind. So he thought that a fish like that was worthy of a sultan. So he took his fish, took his gear, and made his way to the palace, and there he presented himself to the sultan. And normally, simple folk would not be allowed to see the sultan, but he was carrying such a big fish that he was actually allowed to see the sultan himself. Now, when the sultan, with his queen at his side, the sultana, received the fisherman, the sultan's eyes popped out. Immediately he started drooling, and You could see the lust for food in his eyes. So he said, "Are you bringing this fish for me?" "I am, sire. How much do you want for it?" "Oh, sire, this is but a gift to your Royal Highness. I would not charge you with money." Now that did it for the Sultan, because he was so excited with the fish he was going to eat and so taken aback with the man's generosity that he decided it would be a good idea to pay him anyway. So he called his guard, told him, "Go to the royal treasury, take 200 golden coins and bring this to this man." So there he was off inside the treasury, bag of money to the fisherman. Fisherman thanked them kindly, turned his back and was off. And he was so excited about the fish he was going to eat, he had barely had a look at his wife's face, frowning upon him. And he said, "Uh-oh, I must have done something wrong." So he said, "What is it, honey? It is a wonderful fish. Don't you think that I did well to repay the man?" 200 golden coins, husband, my dear Sultan. That's too much money. Is it? It's quite a big fish, you know. Yes, okay, it is a big fish, and I know you really want to eat it, but what if something happens to our kingdom and we're in danger and you send out our army to defend us and they manage to do that? If you pay 200 golden coins for a fish, what are you going to pay the men that are going to save our lives? Wife, I think you're right, but what can I do? I paid the man now. But look, you find an excuse. Tell him, call him back, tell him to return the money, give the fish back. How am I going to do that? I paid for it. Look, listen. You will ask the man whether the fish is a male or a female. And if the fisherman says it is male, you will kindly thank him, but tell him you would rather have a female fish, and vice versa. Do you get it? Yes. Okay, my love, I will do. Reluctantly, because he really wanted to eat that fish, he called his guards and asked them to go get that man back. It hadn't been long. He hadn't left the city yet, so soon he was brought in front of the Sultan again. And the Sultan said, "My good man, I failed to ask you, the fish you brought me, was it a male fish or a female fish?" "Your Highness, I wouldn't dare bring your Royal Highness a simple fish like that. Of course, the fish I brought you was a hermaphrodite." "Oh, thank you, that's a relief," said the Sultan. "Guard, go to the royal treasury, get a bag of 200 gold coins and give this to this man." So the guard was off, returned with another bag full of golden coins, handed it over to the fisherman, and, well, the moment that man was out the door, he did have a look sideways towards his wife, and he could see her smoking out of her ears. "Oh, I did it again, didn't I?" You did. How could you do that?" But as they were arguing, and the man had not yet left the palace, the queen, she saw that from that second sack of money, one golden coin had dropped and was clinging on the floor. And as she heard the noise of the coin, she turned and looked, and she saw the man turning on his heel, picking up the coin, putting it back in the sack, and making his way out of the palace. "Will you look at that?" said the Sultana. "Not if he took all the money you gave him, went away, and one golden coin had dropped from his sack. He could have spared it for the poor. He could have given it away, but no, he was so greedy that he returned and took that coin and put it back in the sack. Now, you get that man back here and you get the money back. Do you hear me?" Yes, my love, will do. Guards, So it was that for the second time that day, the guards went out, and for the third time that day, the man found himself in front of the Sultan. And the Sultan said, well, I have to tell you that I have paid you handsomely for the fish you gave me and for your generosity and for your honesty, but I can see that you're a greedy man. Why would you say that, sire? I saw you. I saw that coin that fell from your bag and how you turned and picked it up and put it back in the sack. And you did not spare a thought, not for a minute, of the other people who could be in need. You picked it up for yourself even though you had so much already. Sire, I'm afraid you've misunderstood me completely. Please. He put his hand inside the bag and he took one golden coin out of it. Have a look, sire. Please tell me, what do you see here? Well, it is my coin. Yeah, but what can you see depicted on the coin, sire? And the Sultan said, well, I needn't look at the coin. It is my coin. I know my face is on it. Exactly, sire. How could I leave that coin on the floor with your royal face on it? Anybody could just pass and step on it. What sacrilege would that be? I could not dishonor you like that, my lord. I see. You're a very reverent man. Guard, go to the royal treasury and get a bag of 200 gold coins and give this to this man. So the guard went to the royal treasury, returned with a third sack of golden coins, handed it to the fisherman. The fisherman thanked him kindly, turned on his heel and ran out of the palace, swift as the wind, before they changed their mind again. And even though the Sultan was delighted that he didn't miss the chance to have that fish, I think that the only one who didn't have a good time in this story was the Sultana. I wonder whether they lived happily ever after. Thank you.
What a lovely little story. Thank you so much. That's brilliant. Yeah. Right, so we're going to Janet in Staffordshire. Stoke-on-Trent or Staffordshire. And then to finish, we've got Maria, and then we'll be finishing around 8 o'clock, which is just absolutely fine. Absolutely beautiful. Okay.
Hi. I've got to tell this one now, this minute. I've got to, because it has in it a sultan, a sultana, and gold coins. I've got to tell it. And it's one of those slightly ridiculous stories for which I have something of a penchant. And if it has any moral to it, look for it yourself, okay? But otherwise, just enjoy it. You see, at the court of the Sultan, who was, by the way, he was a good Sultan. He had a good sense of humor. He loved a bit of fun. He loved a story. He loved a joke. And for that reason, he was very fond of his jester, Ibrahim, very fond of him. Ibrahim would arrive in the morning smiling and making jokes, and the Sultan loved it. He would laugh and he would know that he would have a good day because Ibrahim cheered him up. And so the day that Ibrahim arrived, looking really glum, Sultan said, "Oh, what on earth had happened? Why?" He could barely speak because there was such sadness. And Ibrahim said, "I am sad because my wife has died." "Oh, no wonder you're sad." "Well, actually, the reason I'm really sad is because I don't have enough money to give her a funeral. I don't have enough money to buy the white cotton sheet to cover her. I don't have enough money to buy the finest food or to buy embroidered mourning clothes for myself." You see, Ibrahim was a vain sort of character, but that's beside the point at the moment, but you get the idea. He was short of money. The Sultan said, "No problem. no problem. You have given me such joy. And he reached out to his chancellor, who put the sack of gold in his palm of his hand and passed it over to Ibrahim. Ibrahim took it home, he put it on his kitchen table, he counted it out, and there was 100 gold coins. Oh, wonderful, wonderful. He had enough money to buy the white sheet to cover his wife. He had enough money to buy the finest food for the feast afterwards. He had enough money to buy an embroidered waistcoat, to buy anything he wanted. And all went well. The Sultan that evening visited his wife, the Sultana, and he said, "It's been a sad day because Ibrahim's wife died, and he was sad." "Oh yes," said the Sultana. "And did you help him out in any way?" "Oh, of course. I'm very fond of Ibrahim. So I gave him a purse with 100 gold coins in it. That should help him. That should help him bury his wife and get himself some wonderful clothes and a fine feast." "Yes," said the Sultana. "But no. I'm sure that was a good, but what he really needs is a new wife." "What?" said the Sultan. "He needs a new wife." "Does he really?" said the Sultan. "Yes, he does. What he needs to make him happy is a new wife. And I have in my entourage the very, very person that would suit him. She is gorgeous. She has creamy skin, large eyes. She has black hair with a little bit of red in it. And she sings well. Oh, and does she dance? Oh, and she loves life. That's what Ibrahim needs." "Well, if you say so," said the Sultan. And so it was arranged that the girl, who was called Zara, would meet the jester called Ibrahim. And when Ibrahim looked at Zara, up and down and round about, he thought, "Oh yes, very nice. I like her silken gown. I like her big liquid eyes. I love everything about her." Zara? Well, she looked at Ibrahim up and down and round about. She liked that. Whatever it was she liked it very much. And it was only a very short time before they were married and living very happily and very cheerfully, with lots of fine food, with lots of wonderful clothing, with lots of parties, dancing and singing. But that kind of lifestyle, even for a jester, even for a woman who is in the court of the Sultana, it is an expensive lifestyle. And so as they sat around the kitchen table one evening and looked inside the bag that had all the gold coins in, and there was but one left, they looked at each other and said, "What are we going to do? What are we going to do? Oh, problem. Oh, I know what I'll do," said Ibrahim. "The last time my wife died, I went and told the Sultan, and he saw how sad I was. So, just a minute, said Zara. "I'm not dead." No, said Ibrahim. "You're not dead. I just tell him you're dead." "Ah, okay. That's all right, as long as I'm not dead." "No, you're not dead. I just tell him you're dead." Fine. And so off went Ibrahim. You know, that little bit of onion juice on your fingertips? Right, so, and oh, so upset I am. "What on earth is the matter?" said the Sultan. "What is your problem?" "My wife has died." "Your new wife has died?" Yes, yes, I knew what was trying to. And I have no money for the white sheet. I have no money for the fine food and for my fine mourning clothes. Oh, well, that's bad luck, said the Sultan. Really bad luck to have another wife die. But I think maybe this will help. And it handed to Ibrahim another purse of money. It was money, and it was gold coin, and it tipped out onto the table in the kitchen. I counted it. Zara and Ibrahim, they were delighted. They had another 100 gold coin. They could live life again. And Zara looked at it and said, well, you know something? The last 100 gold coin didn't last all that long. So I've got an idea. I will go to the Sultana and tell her that you have died. Well, I'm not dead. I'm not dead, said Ibrahim. No. No, I tell her you're dead. You don't have to be dead. I just tell her you're dead. Yes, I get it, said Ibrahim. That evening, Zara went to the Sultana. A little bit of soap on your fingertips. Oh, don't do that at home. Whatever you do, don't do that at home. Onion juice is just about manageable, but soap, no, don't do it at home. She did. Her eyes were red rimmed, her cheeks were chapped and sore, and she knelt before the Sultana and said, "Oh no, you know, I don't know what to do. I really don't know what to do. I'm a widow. What do you mean? What do you mean?" said the Sultana. My wonderful Ibrahim, he has died. He has died. I have no one to take care of myself. No one. No man will want to go with you. No, just a minute, said the Sultana. Just a minute. This will probably help you, and you are attractive enough to find another man if that's what you want. But hold out your hand, and the bag of gold was placed in her hand. Taken back to the house, opened on the kitchen table, counted out 100 gold coins. So now 200 gold coins, well, I thought that would do very, very nicely. Very nicely indeed. Now, in the meantime, the Sultan visited his wife, the Sultana, and said, "It's been very sad, hasn't it, to hear that Ibrahim has lost a second wife, and so soon after the first." No, said the Sultana, not at all. You got that wrong. It's the other way around. What do you mean? It's the other way around. It's Ibrahim who has died. No, said the Sultan. It's not. Zara's died. No, Ibrahim's died. No, Zara. Zara, Ibrahim. Backwards and forth. Well, I'm not putting up with this, said the Sultan. I'm going to find out for myself exactly what is going on. He commanded one of his trusty messengers to visit Ibrahim and Zara's house. So the messenger mounted his brown horse, his big brown stallion, and cantered along the cobbled streets towards Ibrahim and Zara's house. Now, on the way there, over the cobbled streets, of course, the horse made a really loud noise on those cobbles. And so, looking through the lattice, Ibrahim and Zara could see them coming. So Ibrahim said to Zara, "Zara, lie down on that daybed, lie down on the couch, and I will cover you. I will cover you with the white sheet." Done. Knock at the door. Come in. And in. Respectfully. Come in. In came the messenger. And he could see the white sheet. Down. No, not too close. Not too close. Remember, respect. He paid his respects. Mounted his horse and went back to the Sultan. It is true. It is true. Ibrahim's wife lies there covered in a white sheet. Sultan, visit his wife. See, told you I was right. Bound to be right. I was right in the first place. No, said the Sultana, not at all, because only earlier today I saw Zara. I know, because she came here to tell me that her husband was dead. No, yeah, it's not right, said this, and backwards and forth. No, yes, no. And so, eventually, you know what happened, of course, don't you? I am going to find out for myself, said the Sultana, and I am going to get my messenger to mount his black stallion and go and visit. And exactly that's what happened. And on the way down through the cobbled street, clickety-clack, 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 and through the lattice windows, they saw him coming. Zara and Ibrahim. And Zara said, get on the couch. Get on the couch, Ibrahim. I'll cover you with a white sheet. He was covered with a white sheet. There was a knock on the door. Come in. Respectfully. Come in. Sultana's messenger looked. Not too close. Not too close. Remember, respect. He left, cantered back, and said to the Sultana, I have seen the white sheet. I've seen the white sheet covering Zara's husband. That evening, there's a lot going on in this day. The Sultan and the Sultana meet, and the Sultana says, you see, you were wrong. I was right. No, yes, no, you can imagine, can't you? Backwards and forwards, until finally the Sultan said, I am going to find out exactly what is going on. This is my favourite jester. He's always made me laugh. He's always playing pranks on me. At home, Ibrahim and Zara think, oh, we got away with that one. Until they heard the clattering of hooves, clickety-clack, clickety-clack, on the cobbles, and through the lattice they saw the Sultan riding down towards their house on his white horse. And there was a knock at the door. The bodies on the couches, covered with white sheets, made not a single sound. Knock again. The bodies on the couches made not a single sound. The Sultan put his hand against the door and pushed it open. Well, this is a fine carry-on, he said. You know, it is so strange. Very odd. He turned. He mounted his white stallion, and as he rode away, he shouted out so loudly that even the dead could hear this. I will give 1,000 gold pieces to whoever it is who can solve this problem. Well, the 1,000 gold pieces were in the saddlebags, and the white ghost-like creatures running after him said, we're not dead. Well, that Sultan, he stopped. He turned. He just stood. They thought, well, maybe we are going to be dead because we played a prank on the Sultan. But the Sultan, he loved a prank. He was also a man of his word. And so from the saddlebags, he took 1,000 gold coins. He gave them to Zara and Ibrahim, who took them onto the kitchen table, counted them out. They now had 1,200 gold coins. And I tell you, those tricksters, they had enough gold coins to keep them in fine clothes and parties and fine food for many, many months. Thank you.
Well, you're right. It had a sultan, a sultana, and a trickster, and coins and everything else. Absolutely right. Well done, Janet. Yeah. It is, as Despina says, you're never quite sure what story you're going to tell, but one sort of emerges and everything else, right? Yeah, right. So there's things coming in on the chat. So we're going to go to Maria, the last, but as I said, very much not the least. And I'm absolutely looking really forward to meeting with you. I'm not sure we've met in person before, but I'll certainly be at East Anglia, God willing. So brilliant.
Great stuff, and I look forward to meeting you there. So there's been fantastic stories this evening, and I thought that I might go into the myths and legends of Ireland, because I don't very often tell them on the Word Storytelling Cafe, but it seems to be an evening where there has been a lot of stories told from the sense of place. So here we go. Once upon a time in Ireland, in the time outside time, in the time before time, in the time that could still be going on, there lived a tribe of warriors known as the Fianna of Ireland. The Fianna of Ireland said that to go to war was the last possible thing that you should do. That the warriors had to be well versed in the arts of negotiation, in the arts of peace, and if that did not work, if the fight was still brought to them, then they must fight with everything they had inside them. One such warrior was a boy called Oisin. Oisin in the Irish language means the little deer, for his mother was Fiola. Fiola of the tribe of the She, the fair folk. She had gone back through the portal to the land of Tir na Nog, to the land of the forever young, when Oisin had been born, and he had been minded by his father, and his father was the Fionn McCool, the famous warrior of the Fianna people. But when she was going back to Tir na Nog, that island in the place between Antrim and Scotland, that island that was known as High Brazil on the maps of the Roman people, when she was going back to this special place, the place behind the Ceod Riachta, behind the misty curtain, she brought with her some water from the Kerry coast, for it is said that that is where Oisin lived. And when she rippled her fingers across the top of the water, when she looked in deeply to that water, when she breathed slowly and deeply, she could see her son in the dream place. And over her shoulder came a little head, the head of Niamh. And when she saw Oisin as a young girl, she said to his mother, "Who is he?" And her mother said, "That is my son, Oisin." And she said, "He looks like fun." And as she grew, he grew. And as he grew and became more beautiful, her heart went out to Oisin the warrior. She said eventually to Fiola, "I love him. I would like to meet him." And she spoke to her father. In the place of Tir na Nog, everyone and everything is equal. And her father said, "If your heart has gone to this boy, then you should go and meet him. What do you need from me?" And she said, "I need a couple bon mara. I need a white horse of the sea. These horses, you understand, are not made of blood and bone and marrow. These horses are made of sea and spray and spirit." And she chose the finest, tallest, hardiest of the Capel Bon Namara to be her steed. He brought her right across the Atlantic Ocean and on to the edge of Eire in County Kerry. And as she climbed up on the land on her special horse, a warrior came to stillness in front of the fairy tree, in front of the whitethorn bush. He looked as if he was in deep reverie there, with his fingers hovering over the blossoms. He had sent his men on ahead, for he knew that something special would happen that day. It could have been the fair part of him that knew the quickening was coming. Niamh rode up behind him on her white horse, and slowly he turned to meet her gaze. When he looked into the eyes that were as blue as the sea on a summer's day, his heart went out to meet Niamh, and he knew deep inside himself that this was the woman he wanted to spend his life with. "Come up behind me," she said, "on the horse. Come for an adventure with me," she said, "to the land of Tir na Nog, to the land of the forever young, where your mother lives, Fiola." "I would like to meet her," he said, and he jumped up on the horse behind her. Across the sea they went to the fair land, to the land of Tir na Nog, where he met his mother and all of the Sidhe, and he felt the kinship and that part of him that was she rise inside himself. 3 days they feasted, 3 days they laughed and sang and joked and danced. 3 days they told the old stories. At the end of 3 days, he said, "I don't want to leave this place. I want to stay with my Niamh. Niamh, will you be my wife?" She was so happy, and agreed readily. And now he said, "I must go back and break the news to my father." "Please don't go," she said. "Please, I have a feeling in my stomach." "I must go," he said. "I must go on my honour to tell my father my news." "Then I put a gasha on you," she said. A gasha was a warrior promise. A warrior would rather die than break the promise of the gasha. "What is it you ask of me?" he said, careful before saying yes. "I ask that you don't put one foot, not one toe, on the soil of Eire. I have a feeling," she said. He readily agreed, and she knew that he would rather die than break his word. So she saddled the horse, and he jumped on top of this beautiful horse that was not made of blood and bone, of marrow, that was made instead of sea and spray and spirit, and it spirited him right across the Atlantic Ocean onto the edge of Eire. But Ireland looked so different now, so different than when he had left 3 days ago. For time runs different in Tir na Nog. In Tir na Nog 3 days had passed, but in Eire 300 years. The ground looked different. The people spoke a different language. It wasn't the Tiang and Driachta. It wasn't the magical language that he was so well versed in. And he saw 2 men watch while an old man struggled to move a stone. Where was the honour of these people gone? How could they look on and let this man work on his own? He called out to them in the Irish language, and they looked confused. He brought his horse up to the old stone, and he put his hand out to push the stone forward. For you see, he wanted to help, and the old man seemed grateful in his face. He could have moved that stone with the smallest of his fingers, for he was a strong Fianna man. Unfortunately, The saddle on the horse was not as strong, and the strap broke. He fell face first into the earth. His elbow followed, his knees, and finally his feet. The witnesses say that his hair grew longer, got streaked with grey, that his face hollowed, that his eyes went back in his head, that his teeth became prominent, before at last his skin began to leave his body. His skeleton fell to the ground until it too became dust and was taken away in the winds of Ireland. They say that if you sit on Banna Beach atop a grey rock, if you become still, that deep in the voice of the wind you can hear Oisin calling for his love. Niamh, Niamh, Niamh.
Oh, Mari, that's absolutely enchanting. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Thank you so much. That was a brilliant. I've heard many of those stories. I've never heard one told better. Thank you very much. That was wonderful. For those of us who are going to be lucky enough to be in East Anglia, we'll see you there in 2 weeks' time. I'm not quite sure where I'll be, but I might just be on a laptop, or someone else might be here because I'll still be over in Norfolk. And there's an old saying about that, and I'm sure I'll enjoy it. So thank you very much for being with us tonight. I'm going to call it then. Chuffy, I've hoped you enjoyed it. I think it was your first time you've been here, and you're very welcome to come again. And absolutely beautiful. Thank you very much. Good night.
Take care, everyone. And once again, happy Mother's Day to all those that it applies.
Yeah.
To be continued. Oh, thanks, Wally.